they called us soft. The word hissed through their mandibles like a curse and a joke at once. To them, humanity was a short-lived, fragile breed, thin bones, exposed skin, no natural claws, no venom, no armor. A species built to be harvested, not remembered. The empire of the Krail had taken 1,000 systems by force and flame, their war fleets blotting out suns. They believed in hierarchy, predators at the top, prey at the bottom. And we, stubborn, dirt-born humans, were prey. The first time they landed on Earth, they did not bring ambassadors. They brought chains. Cities fell in silence under their bombardments. Not rubble and ash, but submission. The Krail did not waste resources, they cracked just enough bones to make the rest bow. Humanity bent, but we did not break. That was their first mistake. In the holding camps, they studied us like livestock. Prods of electrified bone, claws pressed to throats, ration cuts to test compliance. They mocked our fragility. You bruise too easily, one overseer sneered through the translator helm, watching a man struggle to lift a block twice his weight. A body this weak was never meant for stars. The man said nothing. His lip split under the strain, blood dripping to the dust. But he did not drop the block. The overseer tilted his head, bemused. Stupid prey. He didn't see what was happening. None of them did. Not yet. Because here's the thing about fragile creatures, when you strip away everything but pain, you find out what they're made of. And humanity was made of something the Krail had never encountered before. Days turned into weeks. The camps became furnaces of suffering. Hunger gnawed, lashes tore skin, cold bit into marrow. Most species under Krail rule would have buckled, minds collapsing under agony. But the humans adapted. Not by growing stronger, not by healing faster, but by carrying pain forward. Every wound became a lesson. Every scar a story. And the silence, the way humans endured without breaking, that silence became unbearable for the predators. The first cracks appeared in laughter. The overseers, once smug, began to joke too loudly, too often. They needed reassurance. They mocked more, jeered harder, as if volume could drown their unease. The humans gave them nothing back. No screams. No begging. Just the slow, steady grind of persistence. It unsettled the Krail in ways they could not name. One night, in the eastern pen, an overseer struck a child for failing to rise quickly enough. The blow should have shattered the boy's ribs. It did. The boy crumpled, blood wetting the dust. But he crawled back to his feet. Every movement was agony, but he stood, eyes wide, lips trembling but locked. He did not cry out. The camp went still. Even the overseer hesitated, his claw frozen mid-air. The silence stretched. The boy's chest heaved, broken bones shifting with each breath. And then, from the far side of the pen, a ragged voice broke the silence. Still standing. The overseer turned. Another human, older, gaunt with starvation, was on his feet. Then another. And another. One by one, they rose, bodies ruined, eyes blazing. The overseer struck the boy down again, desperate to reassert dominance. The child collapsed, motionless this time. But the damage was done. The silence had turned into something else. Not submission. Not fear. A kind of quiet defiance that seeped into the marrow of every predator watching. They whispered about it later, among themselves. They don't scream. They should scream. The fear was small at first. A splinter under the claw. An itch they could not scratch. But it grew. Weeks later, the Empire tested humanity on the battlefield. The Krail didn't conquer by brute force alone, they broke worlds by spectacle. Prisoners were thrown against impossible odds as entertainment for the conquerors. Those who fought were meant to die quickly, proof of predator superiority. When they unleashed the first cohort of humans, malnourished and unarmed, against armored war beasts, the outcome was supposed to be swift slaughter. The war beasts charged, tusks gleaming, claws scything. Bones cracked. Flesh tore. The sand ran red. But the humans did not scatter. They clung to the beasts with bare hands, tearing eyes, gouging throats with broken nails, using their own shattered bones as weapons. They died, yes. Dozens fell in moments. But they did not stop. One beast went down. Then another. Their deaths were not swift, not clean. They were dragged screaming into the dust, drowning in the stubborn wool of fragile creatures who refused to give them the satisfaction of an easy kill. The overseers watching from the stands shifted uncomfortably. Victory had come, but it had not tasted right. The humans had not played the part of prey. They had changed the script. The Empire took note. New orders were given: study them more closely. Find the weakness. Break it. But the Krail were predators. They did not understand endurance. They had never faced prey that weaponized pain itself. And so, they kept pushing. They kept testing. Until the day everything changed. It began in a camp orbiting a gas giant, far from any fleet routes. A testing ground. The Krail selected a group of humans, stronger, leaner, survivors of the worst conditions, and pitted them against a new horror: the Shriekers. The Shriekers were bred for war, winged things with voices that could paralyze prey. Their scream wasn't just sound, it was vibration that shattered bones, liquefied organs, drove entire herds into convulsions. The Krail expected spectacle. They expected screams. The Shriekers descended, wings blotting out the pale sun, their first cry ripping across the camp. The sound should have dropped every human where they stood. Instead, something else happened. The humans staggered, yes. Blood leaked from ears, muscles spasmed. But they stayed upright. They moved forward. One step. Another. Faces twisted in pain, but not surrender. The Shriekers screamed again, louder, desperate to crush them. But the humans, fragile, skin and bone, bleeding from every pore, kept walking. One reached the creature, grabbed a clawed foot, and with a broken arm still slick with blood, hauled the predator down into the dust. The overseers watching from the towers froze. Their jaws clicked in disbelief. The Shriekers screamed a third time, but now their voices faltered. For the first time, the predators sounded uncertain. Because something worse than prey had looked back at them. Something that would not fall. And in the silence that followed, the humans made no sound. Not even a cry. That silence carried more weight than any scream. But silence never lasts. Because one of the Shriekers, pinned to the ground, let out a final ear-splitting shriek, so loud, so desperate, it cracked the very stone beneath them. And in that instant, something tore loose inside the human line. The Krail didn't sleep that night. Not truly. Predators rest with one eye half open, claws twitching, ears angled toward phantom dangers. But after the shriekers faltered, after the humans roared back, there was no rest at all. Commanders paced in their barracks. Overseers muttered in broken tones. Reports were drafted and redrafted, rewritten to mask the unease curling through their ranks. No one wanted to admit it aloud, prey was not behaving like prey. The humans, locked in their cages again, should have been wrecks. Blood still crusted their faces, ribs cracked, muscles shredded. Yet they didn't collapse. They lay in silence, breathing through shattered lungs, trading no words. Only glances. Only that terrible quiet unity that the Krail could not decipher. The shriekers had failed. And failure had to be explained. The next day, the Empire brought more. They unleashed waves of beasts, the kind that had broken entire civilizations before breakfast. The ground shook with the charge of armored tusk beasts. The sky split under the wings of razorhawks. Venom-blooded crawlers boiled from the pits. The spectacle should have been carnage. And it was, but not the way the Krail expected. The humans didn't win. They were crushed, trampled, torn apart in dozens. The sand drank their blood. Bones snapped like twigs. The predators laughed, at first. This was the way the galaxy was supposed to look, strong over weak, teeth over flesh. But the laughter died quickly. Because even as bodies broke, the line did not collapse. The humans did not scatter. They threw themselves into the monster's jaws again and again, dragging them down with nothing but stubborn weight. They bit, clawed, jammed splinters of their own bones into wounds. They fought long after death should have claimed them. One woman, leg twisted at an angle no joint should endure, crawled beneath a tusk beast and gutted it with a shard of stone. She died beneath its collapse, crushed flat, but the beast went with her. Another man, jaw hanging loose from a hawk strike, clamped that broken jaw around the creature's throat and held until they both drowned in blood. The overseers stopped mocking. Their mandibles clicked in agitation. Their antennae twitched. This wasn't entertainment. This was infection. Because the thing about endurance is that it spreads. It's contagious. When one human rose after being knocked down, another rose too. When one spat blood in silence, another followed. Soon, the predators were the ones shifting back, uncertain. The Krail commanders tried to spin it as inevitability. They died in masses, they reminded their troops. They were slaughtered. But the words rang hollow. Because in every soldier's mind, the memory burned, prey that would not die clean. Prey that made every victory taste of ash. Word spread. Not through official reports, those were scrubbed and censored, but through whispers, through the unguarded exchanges of frightened soldiers. They don't scream. They keep getting back up. They screamed back. The shriekers themselves refused to be deployed again. No amount of whips or shock prods could force them back toward the cages where humans were kept. The creatures shrieked in terror at the very scent of them. That was unheard of. Predators refusing to face prey? The Empire tried to bury it, but rot spreads fast. So the Krail escalated. They shifted strategy. If brute force could not cow the humans, then isolation would. Pain breaks individuals faster than groups. One by one, they began extracting humans from the cages, dragging them into solitary chambers. Deprivation, torture, surgical experimentation. Predators waited eagerly for the screams. But the screams did not come. Days passed. Some humans died in silence. Others were returned, broken bodies barely breathing but alive. Always alive. The silence was worse than any cry. Silence burrowed under skin, rotted into bone. Predators began to dream of it. Waking in the night, ears straining for the sound of prey, only to hear nothing. A commander in orbit over the gas giants snapped during a private council. "They're fragile," he insisted, slamming a clawed fist against the table. "They are prey. This is illusion. Noise. Nothing more." But his voice cracked on the word prey. He heard it too. The doubt. The whisper in his skull that said, "Something is wrong." The Empire had ruled for 1,000 years on fear. But now, fear had shifted. The direction had reversed. The breaking point came 3 cycles later. In the testing pits, a single human was left alive against a pack of bladed hounds. He was gaunt, ribs sharp beneath pale skin, hair matted with blood. The hounds circled, tails bladed, teeth dripping venom. The crowd leaned forward, eager for the kill. The hounds struck. The man fell, torn open, chest a ruin of red. He should have died instantly. But he rose. Chest collapsing, lungs barely holding air, he rose. The hounds hesitated. Predators, bred for slaughter, hesitated. And the human laughed. It was not long. Just a rasping cough of a laugh, choked with blood. But it was unmistakable. Laughter where there should only have been death. The crowd froze. The overseers froze. Even the hounds backed away, whining. And in that silence, the human spoke. Just 2 words. Dry, ragged, more air than sound. Not done. Then he threw himself forward again, broken body tearing into the hounds until the pit dissolved into frenzy. The Krail had witnessed countless species die. None had laughed at death before. None had promised, with their last breath, to keep going. Panic whispered across the Empire. Some dismissed it as weakness in their own minds. Others, in dark corners, admitted a thought they dared not share aloud. If prey refused to be prey, what did that make the predators? The humans were moved to deeper camps after that, buried under greater guards, sealed behind thicker walls. The Empire needed time. Needed to study. Needed to understand what had been unleashed before it spread too far. But fear is a contagion too. And the Krail had already breathed it in. On the edge of the Empire, in a forgotten garrison, an overseer abandoned his post. He left a simple message carved into the walls of his quarters, written in blood from his own severed antenna. They don't stop. It was the first recorded desertion in the history of the Predator Empire. And it would not be the last. Because on the 3rd night after the desertion, in the deepest camp beneath the gas giant, the guards awoke to a sound that chilled their blood. Not screams. Not laughter. A slow, rhythmic pounding. Fists. Human fists. Striking the walls of their cages in perfect unison. The sound echoed through the metal corridors like war drums. And for the first time in their reign, the predators felt hunted. The sound would not stop. Through the corridors of the gas giant camp, the rhythm echoed hundreds of fists, striking steel in unison. Slow, relentless, like the heartbeat of something vast and terrible. Guards shouted for silence, slammed shock prods against the cages, fired into the bars. Still the pounding continued. Thud. 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 Predators were used to fear as a weapon. They understood shrieks, cries, the chaos of prey scattering. This was worse. This was order. This was unity. The humans had no words, no leaders, no signals exchanged, yet every cage struck the walls in the same rhythm, as if the sound came from something larger than themselves. The Empire had no word for it. But the humans did. A drumbeat of defiance. The Krail brought in dampeners, sound scramblers meant to crush the noise. The rhythm only grew louder, fists striking until bones split, blood smearing steel. The cages shook with it. The walls shook with it. Even the air seemed to vibrate with that terrible pulse. Thud. 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 It was not the noise that broke the guards. It was the waiting. The certainty that the next strike would come, and the one after that, and the one after that, forever. Predators are hunters by nature. They live for the rush of the kill, the certainty of dominance. But hunters cannot stomach the idea of prey that keeps coming. Prey that turns death into a drumbeat. So the guards began to crack. They argued in whispers, mandibles clicking with unease. Some demanded the humans be exterminated outright. Others warned that extermination would not be clean, that the silence of human death might be worse than the noise of their persistence. Command sent new orders: transport half the humans to other camps, scatter them. Break the rhythm. It was a mistake. Because when the humans were dragged into transports, bloodied fists chained to their sides, they carried the sound with them. In every ship, in every hold, the pounding began anew. Stripped of weapons, half dead from hunger, they made their bodies into war drums. Thud. 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 The sound spread across the fleet. Crews on different ships reported the same rhythm, even when the vessels were light years apart. It crawled under armor, rattled in the skull, pressed into the brain. Some swore they could hear it even when they were alone. One commander slit his own throat in the silence of his quarters, leaving just a single phrase scrawled in his own fluids. It will not stop. The Empire tried to bury these failures, as they always did. But suppression only fed the whispers. Soldiers carried the rumors like infection. Civilians caught fragments in the trade ports, repeating the words with wide, uncertain eyes. The drumbeat became a phantom. Even those who had never seen a human began to dream of it. The Empire was rotting from the inside, and they did not know how to cut the infection out. Because here's the truth: strength can be countered, speed can be matched, claws can be dulled. But persistence cannot be killed. It spreads like mold in the dark. The humans understood this instinctively. They had no choice. Survival was persistence. Pain was the fuel. In the camps, new horrors were tested. The Krail released firestorms into sealed pens, watching as humans burned. They expected panic, chaos. Instead, they watched men and women wrap themselves around children, shielding them, burning alive without breaking the rhythm of their fists. The overseers screamed at them, why won't you stop? Why won't you scream? The humans gave no answer. They just stared back through smoke-choked eyes, lips tight, teeth bloody, as if to say, we will outlast you. The predators, for the first time, began to doubt the order of the universe. Because if prey would not stop, if prey would not accept its place, then perhaps the Krail were not predators at all. Perhaps they were something smaller. Something hunted. And then came the night of the breach. It began like any other inspection. Guards marching through the central cages, prods sparking, claws dragging across the bars. The humans sat in silence, watching. Too silent. The guards sensed it but ignored it. Prey had no power here. Until the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the camp, total and suffocating. Alarms wailed. Generators sputtered, then died. The guards shouted, blind and frantic. And in that darkness, the sound returned. Thud. 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 But now it was different. Not just fists on steel. Feet on floors. Shoulders against bars. The cages rattled in rhythm. Then the first wall gave way. The guards never understood how. Fragile bodies, bare hands, no tools, but the humans had broken the cage. Torn it open with nothing but persistence, pounding until steel warped and bolts sheared. They poured into the corridors, bleeding, limping, half-dead. No weapons but their own bones, their own rage. The guards fired wildly into the dark, plasma bolts scorching flesh. Humans fell. Others climbed over the corpses, kept moving, eyes blazing white in the emergency lights. The predators shouted for reinforcements, but the lines jammed with static. The pounding carried through the walls, through the comms, shaking the very signals they relied on. It was chaos. Not the chaos of prey scattering. The chaos of predators realizing the hunt had reversed. One guard, cornered against a wall, raised his rifle to fire, then froze. Because a human stood before him, chest split wide, half his face gone. A man who should have been dead. Yet he moved forward, step by dragging step, blood dripping in steady rhythm onto the floor. And the guard, armored, born to kill, dropped his weapon and fled. The humans did not roar. They did not cheer. They moved like shadows, like inevitability, silent but for that endless pounding. The camp fell in hours. By the time reinforcements arrived, the cages were empty. Hundreds of humans gone, vanished into the tunnels of the gas giants' mining shafts. And in their place, carved into the steel walls of the abandoned camp, was a single word, written in blood. Hunt. The Empire had always thought themselves predators. But predators kill quickly, decisively. They do not drag it out. They do not make pain into a language. The Krail realized too late what they were facing. Not prey. Not predators. Something worse. And in the deep tunnels of the gas giant, where the light did not reach, the pounding began again. Thud. 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 Only this time, it was moving closer. The tunnels swallowed them. The Krail thought the gas giant's shafts would cage the humans as surely as the steel pens had. Mile-long veins of rock and ore, no light, no food, no maps. To predators, such places meant death. The Empire believed the humans would wither and vanish in the dark. They didn't understand what they'd given them. Darkness was no prison. It was cover. It was patience made solid. It was silence sharpened into a blade. For weeks, nothing came out of the tunnels. Patrols scoured the entrances, claws on triggers, scanning for movement. They found only echoes, dripping water, and the faint smell of blood. But the humans were still there. Watching. Waiting. The first guard disappeared on the 12th night. Pulled into the dark with no sound but the scrape of claws against stone. His squad searched for hours, torches burning, rifles humming. They found only his helmet dented, slick with blood. The second vanished 2 nights later. Then 3 more. Each taken faster, quieter. Panic spread among the guards. The tunnels became a nightmare, every shadow a mouth, every echo a footstep. The commanders assured them this was impossible. They are prey, they barked. They do not hunt. They scatter. But no one believed it anymore. Not after they started finding marks carved into the stone. Human hands, bleeding from claws of rock, had scratched words into the walls of the shafts. Single words, jagged, raw. Still. Closer. Endure. Every patrol swore the words hadn't been there the night before. Every patrol felt the hair rise along their carapaces as they realized the humans weren't just surviving in the dark. They were moving in it. They were claiming it. And then the rhythm returned. Deep in the rock, faint but undeniable, came the sound. Thud. 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 The same pounding that had haunted the camps, now echoing through stone and metal alike. Patrols followed it, desperate to stamp it out, only to vanish one by one. The tunnels ate them whole. Fear spread faster than orders could contain it. Soldiers muttered that the humans had become wraiths, that death itself had taken their form. Some refused to enter the tunnels at all. The commanders grew desperate. They ordered fire poured into the shafts, plasma charges, incendiary floods. Entire sections of the mines collapsed, sealing hundreds of humans inside. The Krail celebrated. For one night, they believed the threat ended. Until the pounding began again. From deeper. Louder. The humans had not been buried. They had burrowed deeper, carved new paths through fire and stone. Every collapse only seemed to drive them further, spread them wider. The predators realized they hadn't contained the infection, they had fed it. The Empire dispatched elite hunters to the gas giant. These were not guards or overseers. These were killers bred for war, cloaked in armor, armed with plasma blades, trained to erase whole insurgencies. They marched into the tunnels with confidence. They returned in pieces. The few survivors babbled nonsense, mandibles clacking in terror. They don't fall. They don't stop. They come from the dark. The dark itself moves. No one listened long. The survivors tore out their own throats within days, unable to bear the memory. The commanders sealed the shafts entirely after that. Entire mining operations abandoned, tunnels collapsed with orbital strikes. Billions of credits of resources wasted. But the pounding did not stop. Now it came from beneath their own bases. From the floors of their barracks. From the walls of their command posts. The sound traveled like infection, carried through the very bones of the planet. Thud. 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 Everywhere at once. The Empire could not silence it. And silence, they were learning, was worse. Silence meant the pounding was only waiting, biding its time. The Krail had built their dominion on fear. But now fear stalked them in the corridors, slept in their beds, whispered in the quiet between heartbeats. Soldiers turned on each other in paranoia. Commanders demanded extermination. Civilians whispered of omens, of the Empire's end. And through it all, the humans endured. No weapons. No ships. No fleets. Just persistence, grinding forward step by step, until the predators who had once mocked them began to dread the very idea of them. The tipping point came when the pounding reached orbit. On the night of the 63rd cycle, a Krail warship stationed above the gas giant received a transmission. No encryption, no signal header, just raw sound. Thud. 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 The crew froze. The sound filled every deck, every console, every helmet comm. The engineers swore no transmission existed. The comms team screamed that the channels were empty. Yet the sound kept coming, as if the ship itself carried the heartbeat of something crawling up from below. And then came the voice. Broken, jagged, human. Still here. Every light on the warship died. When the emergency lamps flickered on again, the ship's captain was gone. His chair was slick with blood, the word endure carved into the steel beside it. The predators no longer believed they were fighting prey. They believed they were fighting death itself. And death was winning. But worse was still to come. Because 3 cycles later, for the first time, the pounding stopped. And silence fell. Total. Perfect. Suffocating. The Empire leaned forward, straining to hear what came next. Relief battled terror. And then, from the deepest black of the tunnels, came a sound no predator had ever imagined hearing. Not fists. Not laughter. Not silence. The long, ragged inhale of something preparing to scream. The Krail had mocked humans for silence. They had starved them, whipped them, broken their bones, all to force the sound of surrender from their throats. They believed silence was weakness, that prey should scream, that pain should sing out. But now silence was terror. When the pounding stopped, entire garrisons froze. The rhythm had haunted them, shaking through walls and comms, seeping into dreams. They had begged for quiet. Now they had it. And it was worse. Because silence meant change. For 3 long cycles, nothing stirred. No fists on steel. No footsteps in tunnels. No whispered words carved in blood. The humans vanished, swallowed by the dark. The Empire dared to hope. Maybe starvation had finally claimed them. Maybe collapse and fire had buried them alive. Maybe persistence, even theirs, had limits. The commanders began to speak louder in their halls, laughing too hard, pretending relief. The infection has burned out, they declared. The prey is gone. But they did not believe it. Not truly. And their fear was justified. On the 4th cycle, the silence broke. It began as a tremor. Not from bombs, not from machinery, but from throats. From lungs. A sound so raw, so jagged, it peeled the air apart. A scream. Not of fear. not of surrender. A scream of defiance, torn from 100 human voices in perfect unison, rising from the tunnels like the birth cry of a world. The Krail staggered, claws clutching their heads. The sound vibrated through armor, rattled teeth, cracked glass. It wasn't just noise. It was pain turned weapon, agony sharpened into resonance. The Shriekers, the Empire's proudest terror beasts, bred to destroy prey with their voices, howled in panic, wings thrashing. Their own screams were drowned, swallowed whole by the human roar. For the first time, predators understood what it meant to be prey to sound. The scream lasted for minutes. It shook stone loose from the shafts, sent consoles sparking, ruptured calm lines. And when it finally ended, when the air was raw and silence returned, nothing was the same. Because the scream had carried farther than the tunnels. It had traveled through the comnet. Through the bones of ships in orbit. Through the listening posts of half a dozen nearby systems. Entire worlds heard it. Civilians froze in marketplaces, claws trembling on goods. Soldiers dropped rifles, chests heaving. Predators looked at one another in wide-eyed disbelief. They had heard prey scream. But never like this. The scream was not begging. It was not surrender. It was a promise. The Krail High Command panicked. Orders flew across the network: silence all humans, exterminate every survivor, burn the camps to ash. But the Empire was too slow. The infection had already spread. The scream became myth overnight. Some swore it carried words buried in the noise, messages the Empire was too afraid to admit. Still here. Not prey. Your turn. Whispers spread in every garrison, every barracks. Soldiers reported hearing echoes long after the sound had ended. Some gouged at their own ears, desperate for silence. Others refused to patrol at all. Predators who had once mocked humanity now feared shadows in their own corridors. They began to lock their doors at night, mandibles chattering in the dark. Some swore they could still hear breathing just beyond the walls. And the humans? They moved like smoke. The scream was not the end. It was the beginning. They struck in small groups at first. An overseer dragged into the dark, his corpse nailed to a wall with the word endure carved into his chest. A supply convoy ambushed, every guard slain with bare hands, crates of weapons gone. The humans fought with nothing but shards of stone, scraps of metal, and their own bodies, but it was enough. Because every strike was not just a victory. It was a message. They could not be broken. The Empire tightened its grip. Armored divisions flooded the gas giant. Surveillance drones swept the tunnels. Kill teams swept camps with flamethrowers. But every time they thought they had cornered the humans, they were wrong. The prey slipped through, silent, patient, always watching. And always leaving behind the same mark. Hunt. The predators began to understand. They had unleashed something worse than rebellion. This was not war. This was redefinition. The Krail had built their dominion on the certainty of the hunt. But now the hunt had turned. Now the galaxy whispered of prey that endured, prey that learned, prey that screamed not in death but in challenge. And something else stirred in the dark, something the Krail had not planned for. The other enslaved species, the broken prey of 100 worlds, began to whisper the same words in their pens. They mimicked the rhythm. They copied the scream. The infection was spreading beyond humanity. And the predators knew, with a shiver of dread, that their empire had begun to rot. But rot was only the beginning. Because 1 week after the first scream, a Krail battleship caught an unscheduled transmission on an encrypted frequency. No code. No signal header. Just breathing. Slow. Steady. Human. Then 3 words, clear as a blade sliding free of its sheath. We are coming. The battleship went dark within the hour. The Krail believed they could smother rebellion with fire. They thought overwhelming force could cauterize the wound before it spread. They did not understand the infection. They sent legions into the tunnels beneath the gas giant's colony, armored in chitin plates and armed with weapons that had crushed civilizations. They flooded the shafts with heat, flame, gas. They sealed entrances, collapsed entire caverns, confident nothing could survive. But when the smoke cleared, the humans were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The soldiers found claw marks gouged into their own fortifications. They found corpses of their comrades, strung up in mockery. And they found words carved into steel and letters too crude to be machine-made. Still here. The commanders spat fury, but their soldiers trembled. Each time they struck, the humans vanished deeper into the dark, only to reappear days later, taking more weapons, more lives, more ground. They were learning. The Krail had always mocked prey for weakness, for lacking claws, for lacking armor. But weakness was a lie. Humans took their own wounds and made them weapons. They wrapped cloth around burns, turned shattered helmets into blades, fashioned traps from the Empire's discarded machinery. And more than that, they learned their enemy. The Krail moved in squads of 3. Soon, 3 became the number most often ambushed. The Krail preferred to rest near geothermal vents. Soon, every vent became a death trap. The predators began to whisper of shadows that listened, that stalked, that remembered. And while the humans fought in the tunnels, something else stirred above. On occupied worlds, the scream spread. The Krail slaves, docile for generations, began to pound their fists against the walls of their cages. Some bled themselves raw against iron just to make the rhythm. Thud. 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 The predators laughed at first. They beat those who joined in, ripped out tongues, shattered jaws. But the rhythm did not stop. The sound spread like fire through dry grass. Soon, entire camps throbbed with the same unyielding pulse. Thud. 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 It carried through the Empire's comm lines, through the ground, through the bones of soldiers who could not escape the sound even in sleep. The Krail began to fear silence. Because silence meant it was building. Silence meant it was waiting. And then came the raids. A mining outpost in the outer colonies, stripped of its overseers overnight, every guard found dead, throats cut, weapons stolen. Only one message left behind, painted in blood on the walls. Your turn. A supply freighter bound for the throne world boarded mid-flight, its crew slaughtered with their own tools. The ship was found drifting, its engines still burning, cargo gone. No trace of the humans inside. And on a barren moon, a forward garrison vanished without a trace. When reinforcements arrived, they found no soldiers, no bodies, only helmets arranged in a circle around the base's comm tower. Inside the circle, one phrase carved again and again into the stone. Endure. The Empire called it terrorism. They declared humanity vermin, infection, plague. They poured more fleets into the hunt. But the more they hunted, the more they bled. The humans were not winning by strength. They were not winning by numbers. They were winning by persistence, by patience, by turning every lash into fuel. And for the first time in the Empire's history, its predators began to turn their eyes inward. They whispered in their own halls, "What if the humans cannot be killed? What if prey has become something else?" Fear crept into the Krail's own speech. Some refused to deploy. Some deserted, abandoning posts in the night. Some tore their own throats open just to escape the sound that followed them everywhere. And in the shadows, the humans smiled through blood and broken teeth. Because the predators had given them pain. And humanity had learned how to weaponize pain itself. The Empire was cracking. The scream had become more than defiance. It had become contagion. And then, on the edge of the Krail's home system, a signal flared. Not from human comms. Not from stolen tech. From a captured Krail battleship. Its transponder blinked with a message impossible to misinterpret. "We have your claws." The predators stared at their own channels in disbelief. Their strongest weapons, their fortress ships, their pride taken. And they realized too late that their hunt was no longer safe. Because the prey had stepped onto their ships. And the sound of fists on steel had followed them into orbit. The Krail called their battleships the Claw of Heaven. Whole civilizations had surrendered at the sight of their silhouettes blotting out suns. No prey had ever boarded one. No prey had ever survived inside one. Until now. The Claw of Heaven, Dresshack, should have been invincible. It carried 40,000 soldiers, 3 shrieker beasts, and enough firepower to glass a continent. But when its patrol failed to report, and when its signal returned days later with nothing but the sound of breathing on loop, the Empire knew something was wrong. A fleet was dispatched to investigate. When they found the Dresshack, it was drifting on silent thrusters, scarred but intact. Hails went unanswered. Sensors showed life aboard, but indistinct shadows moving through corridors, power rerouted in impossible ways. The boarding party entered. They did not return. The only thing that emerged was sound. A rhythm. Fists on steel. Thud. 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 Across the Empire, the news spread like rot through wood. Prey had not only resisted. Prey had taken the claw itself. The Krail High Command panicked. They ordered the Dresshack destroyed at range, but when the fleet fired, the stolen battleship moved. Its cannons roared, not in Krail patterns, not with predator precision, but with human rage. Every shot missed by inches, smashed into ships that thought themselves untouchable, sent fireballs blooming in the void. Humans were not engineers. They were not trained for predator tech. But they learned. They adapted. And they endured. Within hours, 2 destroyers were gone. 3 more fled. The Empire's fleet retreated from its own ship. Predators who once laughed at fragile prey now whispered of ghosts piloting their war machines. And inside the Dresshack, humans walked the halls with stolen rifles, faces streaked with grease and blood. They slept in the predator's barracks, ate from predator rations, patched their wounds with predator tools. They were not supposed to survive this long. But that was the mistake. The Krail still believed survival was the limit of prey. Humans did not only survive. They persisted until survival became victory. And the infection spread. On occupied worlds, whispers turned to open revolt. Enslaved species who had once bent their necks began to rise. They mimicked the scream, the rhythm, the refusal to yield. Whole garrisons were overrun not by strength, but by persistence. Slaves who would not stay down, who clawed at soldiers with bare hands until the predators drowned in a tide of defiance. The Krail commanders barked orders louder, demanded more blood, more executions, more fire. But nothing they did stopped it. Because pain, their oldest weapon, no longer worked. Every lash, every burn, every broken bone became fuel for the fire. And then came the message. Hijacked across the Empire's comnet, overriding every channel, every broadcast, even the throne world's own networks. A face appeared. Human. Gaunt. Scarred. Eyes burning through the static. The voice was ragged, broken, but steady. You wanted a scream. He leaned forward, lips curling into something between defiance and a death sentence. Now you'll never stop hearing it. The feed cut. But the sound remained. Not words. Not speeches. The scream. Human voices howling across the stars, carried on stolen frequencies, deafening predator ears across systems. Ships malfunctioned. Soldiers collapsed. Civilians clawed at their own throats to shut it out. And the predators, once certain of their dominion, looked at one another and asked the question their kind had never spoken aloud. What if we cannot win? The question echoed in their halls, in their fleets, in their shrines of conquest. And in the silence that followed, the humans moved again. The Dresshack was not the last ship they would take. It was only the first. The Krail Empire stretched across 600 worlds. For centuries, every planet sang the same rhythm, the predator's shriek above, the prey's silence below. It was order. It was law. Now the rhythm was broken. On the ice colonies of Rith, slaves once beaten into silence began to pound their frozen fists against the walls of their pens. The sound spread through the ice tunnels like a drum, echoing for kilometers. Guards laughed at first. Then the laughter faltered when the pounding didn't stop, even as blood froze and bones shattered. When the gates finally burst, the guards were not slaughtered by soldiers or weapons. They were drowned in bodies, frail bodies, starved bodies, broken bodies that refused to yield. The predator's blades cut down hundreds. Thousands kept coming. The guards fled into the snow, hunted by those they had once called cattle. On the sulfur mines of Dalvik, a single human scream lit the spark. Not from a warrior. From a child. The shriek carried through the mines, bouncing through tunnels, igniting voices long choked. Within hours, tens of thousands screamed back. Overseers clawed their ears bloody trying to silence it. But the sound was inside them now, rattling in their skulls, pulling apart the illusion of dominion. The mines fell in a night. Across the empire, the contagion spread. Every cage became a battlefield. Every whip became a reminder. Every scar became a banner. The Krail High Command issued decree after decree: burn the camps, exterminate the revolters, silence the scream. They unleashed shriekers on entire cities, their sonic blasts turning streets to rubble. But when the smoke cleared, the prey still crawled forward, still clawed their way upright, still screamed through ruined lungs. The predators had built their throne on the assumption that pain breaks all things. But pain was now a weapon turned against them. The galaxy had shifted. And then came the fires. Humanity did not remain in shadows. They came from the tunnels, from the ashes, from the stolen battleship Dreshak and the ships that followed. In orbit above Krail colonies, vessels once proud in predator hands now bore human scars across their hulls. The prey had learned to fly. One by one, predator fleets broke against them. Not because the humans fought with superior strength, but because they refused to retreat. They rammed ships twice their size. They boarded cruisers with nothing but stolen rifles and knives cut from steel piping. They died by the thousands. They won anyway. For every human that fell, 3 more rose. For every scream that was silenced, 10 more thundered through the void. The Krail whispered among themselves. Some spoke of the humans as cursed. Others as possessed. Some believed they were no longer prey at all, but something older, something primal, something that had lived through extinction and would live through it again. Whatever the name, one truth spread through the empire: the scream could not be stopped. And it grew louder. Entire planets fell not with battles, but with silence breaking into sound. Prey who had never seen humans before now mimicked them, joining the infection of defiance. The rhythm pounded across 600 worlds, until it seemed the galaxy itself had learned to breathe in unison. Thud. 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 The predators who once filled the stars with certainty now felt the weight of something they had never faced: inevitability. And still the humans pushed further. From the bridge of the stolen Dreshak, scarred captains whispered plans that no prey should have dared to speak. Not just raids. Not just uprisings. A march. A march to the throne world itself. The heart of the empire. The place where predator screams had once risen high enough to drown out the cosmos. The place that would now hear something else. The throne world of the Krail had never known fear. Its spires rose like blades of obsidian into a sky filled with the shadows of warships. Armies drilled in endless formations across the parade grounds, their shrieks echoing through the streets like hymns of conquest. Every stone, every tower, every heartbeat of the city had been built on certainty: predators do not fall. That certainty was gone. The sky above was no longer filled with parades. It was filled with fire. The humans had come. At first, the empire told itself the invaders were few, scavengers and stolen hulls. But when the fleets clashed at the edge of the system, reality bled through. Predator warships fell to ramshackle human flotillas that refused to retreat. Whole squadrons were crippled not by superior firepower, but by prey that threw themselves into battles they had no right to survive. Persistence ate through the predators' numbers faster than claws or teeth ever had. And the scream carried with them. Every frequency the predators tried to use was hijacked. Instead of orders, soldiers heard human voices howling, howling, howling until their hands shook and their claws refused to obey. The throne world shook with panic. Citizens sealed their doors and whispered to one another. They had never seen humans, never touched prey with their own claws, yet they dreamed of them every night now. Pale faces in the dark. Hollow eyes. Teeth bared in defiance. And always the sound, fists on steel, the roar that would not end. The high command gathered in the citadel, their mandibles clattering in fury. Orders flew: activate planetary shields, summon every fleet, burn the approaching ships before they reach orbit. But the fleets did not come. Because there were no fleets left. 600 worlds burned with rebellion. Garrisons abandoned their posts. Soldiers mutinied. The Empire's claws had been shattered across its own dominion. The throne world stood alone. The first human ships broke orbit. They were scarred, broken things, patched hulls, scavenged engines, fire bleeding from their wounds. But they kept coming. For every one that fell, another rose from behind, limping, bleeding, unyielding. On the ground, the predators prepared their defenses. Artillery lined the spires. Shriekers were released into the streets, their throats raw with sonic fire. Every soldier was armed, every shadow watched. The humans landed anyway. They did not descend in formation. They did not march like armies. They spilled from broken transports, some crawling, some dragging wounded limbs, some bleeding so heavily they should have been corpses already. But they walked. And the predators faltered. Because it was not numbers that undid them. It was not weapons. It was the sight of prey that would not stop. The first clash was brutal. Predator claws tore through flesh. Shriekers screamed until stone walls cracked. Human bodies fell in heaps. And still the survivors pushed forward. Through fire. Through blood. Through the screams of their own dying. Every step brought them closer to the citadel. The Krail commanders shrieked for their soldiers to hold the line. They promised glory, promised blood, promised survival. But their soldiers' eyes were already wide with something else. Because as they struck, they realized nothing they did mattered. The prey kept coming. Every cut only fueled them. Every death only carried the rhythm forward. Thud. 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 The sound pounded against the walls of the citadel itself. The same sound that had haunted the Empire since the tunnels of the gas giant. The sound that had never stopped. And inside, the High Lords trembled. For the first time in their history, they asked the question none of them dared before. What if the prey had never been prey at all? The citadel gates shuddered as explosions rocked the foundations. The scream rose in the streets, louder, sharper, tearing the night apart. The humans pressed forward, broken hands beating against stone, voices ripping themselves bloody. The last gates of the Empire began to crack. And the predators, once the terror of the galaxy, finally understood dread. They were not waiting for victory. They were waiting for their last scream. The citadel gates broke at dawn. The first light of the throne world's sun spilled through the shattered arch, burning across streets littered with blood and ash. The air stank of smoke and ozone, of flesh scorched by shriek beams and charred by plasma fire. The predators had held the night with claws and screams, but morning had brought something they could not stop. The humans were still standing. Not many. Gaunt faces, hollow-eyed, bodies wrapped in torn bandages and smeared in soot. Some leaned on one another, some limped with shattered legs, some dragged weapons too heavy for their frail arms. But they stood. And as the gates fell inward, they moved forward. The predators guarding the citadel walls did not charge. They backed away, mandibles trembling, rifles rattling in their claws. Their leaders shrieked orders, bellowed threats, promised punishments worse than death. None of it mattered. The soldiers had already seen what was coming. The sound. It began as a murmur. Fists on walls, on steel, on their own chests. A rhythm that had followed the Empire across 600 worlds. A rhythm that would not die. Thud. 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 The rhythm grew. Louder. Stronger. It echoed through the ruins, through the broken spires, through the hearts of predators who had once believed themselves eternal. And then came the scream. It rose from every human throat, torn from lungs raw with smoke and blood, bursting through cracked lips and shattered teeth. It was not one voice. It was all of them, wounded, dying, unbroken. The sound slammed against the citadel walls, rattled through its towers, tore the air into shreds. Predators dropped their weapons, clutching their ears. Shriekers reared back, their own sonic blast swallowed whole, until their throats ruptured and they collapsed thrashing in their own gore. The humans did not stop. The scream climbed higher, vibrating through stone, through steel, through the bones of every predator still alive inside the citadel. Windows exploded. Statues of conquest cracked and tumbled. The great banners of the Empire, once symbols of dominion, tore from their poles and fell into fire. Inside the throne chamber, the High Lords cowered. The chamber was carved from blackstone, walls thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. But the sound reached them anyway. It slithered through cracks, through stone, through the marrow of their bones. They had tried to weaponize fear. Now fear was all they had left. One of them staggered to the center of the chamber, robes torn, mandibles dripping with blood. He raised his arms high and shrieked, the predator's ancient cry, the sound that had broken prey for millennia. The lords joined him. They screamed as one, filling the chamber with the shriek of their kind, a desperate wall of sound meant to drown the humans out. But their voices wavered. Their screams cracked. Because the roar outside was louder. The human scream swallowed theirs whole. The predator's last scream died in its own throat, smothered under the weight of prey who would not yield. The citadel walls shuddered as the humans broke through. They poured into the throne chamber, bleeding, limping, eyes hollow with exhaustion yet blazing with something older than rage. The High Lords stumbled back against their throne, claws scrabbling at the stone, voices failing. The humans did not raise banners. They did not shout words of triumph. They simply kept screaming. One by one, the predators fell to their knees, hands pressed to their ears, blood leaking between their claws. The last of the Empire, broken not by blades, not by fire, but by the sound of the prey they had once mocked. The scream did not stop when the last lord fell. It did not stop when the citadel cracked and collapsed, burying the throne under its own weight. It carried on, rising higher, surging outward into the skies, bleeding into every channel, every comnet, every ship still drifting in orbit. Across the galaxy, billions heard it. On the frozen colonies of Rith, freed slaves screamed back. On the sulfur mines of Dalvik, broken voices joined. On ships in deep space, survivors raised their throats until their lungs tore. The scream became more than human. It became universal. The predators had built their empire on a lie, that prey exists only to feed hunters. The scream burned that lie to ash. When silence finally returned, it was not weakness. It was finality. The empire was gone. No predators. No throne. No screams but their own, lost in the roar that ended them. The galaxy did not cheer. It did not sing. It listened. Because every species knew the truth now, etched into the bones of history. Pain is not weakness. Endurance is not silence. And when prey refuses to break, predators learn fear. But Krail had mocked humanity for not screaming. In the end, it was the human scream that erased them.